What Fred claims to want in A Handmaid's Tale and what Fred actually wants are two very different things, and this is a situation I have seen play out in real life many, many times. As much as Fred was a defender of the patriarchy, I think that it suffocated him and was very much in contradiction with who he actually was as a person. And if you guys want more Handmaid's Tale character breakdowns, make sure you subscribe, and I've got a playlist with the others I've already done. I have done Serena and how she is in a very similar position to Fred, where she ended up living a life that was very contradictory to what she claimed to want. But I've always found Fred to be a very interesting character because when we look at his dynamic with Serena in season 1, it's very easy to imagine that they had a dead relationship. And we find very early on that Fred pursues June pretty intensely. So if he hates Serena so much, why did he marry her in the first place? Because from those scenes, we see that they used to have a thriving relationship and a very active, intimate life. Fred seems deeply attracted to Serena. Fred is clearly very attracted to Serena, but on top of that, he's also deeply supportive of her as a husband. Even though, by the standards of the sons of Jacob, Serena is an awful wife. She's everything that a wife shouldn't be. If Fred is seeking a quiet, submissive wife, Serena is clearly not that in any way. If anything, it seems like Serena is really the star of their marriage, while Fred kind of hangs out in the background. She's the one going on speaking tours. She's the one who's got a best-selling book. She has a thriving career, and she is front and center for the sons of Jacob and their message. And Fred never even seems to want to be front and center. In fact, when Serena goes to a college and tries to give a speech and the students boo her off stage, Fred does speak up, but only to say that everyone should let Serena speak. Everyone should listen to what his wife has to say. He's not concerned at all with sharing his own opinion or his own voice. And the weirder thing is that Fred never seems to mind this. There doesn't seem to be any conflict between him and Serena for the fact that she's center stage. When Serena is able to give her speech and they walk out together, Fred is so clearly deeply proud of the work she's done. He tells her that she is a truth teller. When Serena tells Fred that she's considering writing another book about the moral imperative of giving birth, Fred says that she should write it. He has so much pride in her career, while all the while he's working with the sons of Jacob to try to instill a society where women cannot have careers, where they only serve inside of the home. But if you look at the flashbacks, it never seems like Fred actually wants this, not only because he's deeply supportive of Serena's career, but also because when the sons of Jacob take over and Serena is supposed to go give a speech to them and they tell her, hey, no, we no longer want to hear your ideas, even though you are pivotal in getting this movement off the ground, like we're done hearing from you, you need to go back in the house. You can see that not only does this disappoint Serena, it seems to really bother Fred. And Commander Putnam says something to him like, oh, this is our fault. We gave the women too much power. They forgot their place. We'll make sure they don't forget it again. And Fred just doesn't look like he's super on board with this idea. This was not a man whose goal was ever to silence his wife, but he was also devoutly religious and really wanted to fix the fertility problem, and so he went with it, despite the fact that he loved Serena's opinions and that he was her deepest defender. And he really was her biggest defender. After she was in that sniper attack and he was in the hospital with her, he vowed to find whoever did this to her. And he did. And he ended the life of the sniper's wife right in front of him before he took his life. That was a man who risked it all just to defend the woman that he loved more than anything. So how did their relationship become so cold, so devoid of life and passion? To answer this question, I think we need to look at what happened when Gilead actually came into power. Who did Serena become? Because she quickly had to adjust and become the kind of wife that Gilead said was ideal. Serena was silenced. Her career was ended. She couldn't even read, even though she used to previously be a writer. She had to be more meek, less opinionated, and go with whatever Fred wanted. And in doing this, she lost all of the traits that made Fred so attracted to her. And so what does he do? He turns to June. And does he try to immediately sleep with June? Is he just trying to get his rocks off with a handmaid? No, it doesn't really seem like that's the kind of guy that he is. What he does first with June is take her into his office to play Scrabble. And this serves two purposes. One, Scrabble is a game that you need to show off your intelligence and your wit. So you got to see a woman once again in her element. June was an editor. He knew that she was good at this, and he wanted to bear witness to that. And the other element is that Scrabble was also a rebellious act for June. She wasn't supposed to be reading. And in fact, he encourages her to read and gives her magazines. So he gets two of these traits that he loved with Serena, her intellect and her fire, her rebellion. Traits that he never gets to see in his wife again, but that he craves so badly. And I've got a broader theory on why Fred chooses to cheat with June, because this is a situation that, like, let's be honest, we see it time and time again. I'm not going to name names. I'm sure some names come to your guys' mind, but over and over again, you hear conservative politician or conservative political commentator cheat on his wife that is supposedly everything that he wants. She's Christian. She is raising their kids at home. She's submissive to him. And the woman that he ends up cheating with is always the exact opposite of that, right? It's always some career woman, some very famous journalist, usually a left wing individual. And I have also heard stories of women who put it out there on their dating profiles very openly that they are on the left politically, and yet conservative men will lie about their beliefs to try to get on a date with the left wing women, even though there are conservative women out there who are willing to date. And more recently, I've seen a few different stories from women online. Granted, this is anecdotal, but women who actually ask these men, "Why are you trying to date me instead of a woman who aligns with your beliefs?" And one answer I saw was that conservative women are just less fun. There's less banter, there's less challenge. These women who are acting submissive to them simply aren't as entertaining, because when a woman goes on a date and she's intending to be submissive and she's answering really eagerly and she's agreeing with what the guy is saying, trying to be what he wants, that is actually unappealing. And my greater theory on that is that everyone, regardless of your gender, regardless of your ideology, we are biologically, evolutionarily trained to want a partner who is smart, independent, successful, because these traits were things that helped us survive. No matter what your religious ideology says or your political ideology says, competence is still the most attractive thing. Somebody who's going to challenge you is still the most attractive thing. Somebody who is smart and witty. That is what we are all seeking, because we all, at the end of the day, want competent partners more than we want somebody who's going to agree with everything that we say and do. I really think the only men who genuinely get something out of women who are submissive to them are men who are so deeply insecure that they just cannot cope with the challenge of a competent partner, that they do not want to feel lesser than in any situation. But honestly, even those deeply insecure men at some point just get bored with somebody who is constantly agreeing with them, who isn't challenging them, who has none of their own ambitions. It's not attractive universally. And to be clear, I think there are plenty of stay at home moms and stay at home wives who are not subservient and who are contributing in their marriage, and their husbands enjoy marriage with them because they're not subservient. I don't think that like staying at home and subservience goes hand in hand, but I think the kind of women that Gilead claimed to want, subservient, quiet, meek women, that's the kind of thing that nobody is attracted to. Because you can be a stay at home wife and obviously give your opinions and have your own interest and your own personality. But to be a robot for your husband's opinions and your husband's thoughts, it's never going to work out in the long term. And I think another reason that conservative men aren't attracted to conservative women can be summed up with another story I heard of a woman who asked the man flat out, like, "Why were you lying about your political beliefs?" And what he said is that when he goes on dates with these conservative women, they put him very much in a box. Their views of what they want from him are very rigid. Like, he needs to be the one to pay always. He needs to be a leader. He needs to man up. He better not show emotions around her. These boxes that feel very restrictive to him, and he doesn't feel like he can be himself. And then he goes out with these left wing women, and he feels like he just doesn't need to subscribe to such a tight idea of what a man is. And it's like, yeah, buddy, the point's going right over your head. The patriarchy traps men too, and I think it definitely trapped Fred. Fred gets stuck with the patriarchal idea of what a man should be when that is not anywhere close to Fred's actual personality. I think that Fred is naturally a more submissive person himself, like a meeker person himself. Not that he has no opinions, but he kind of leans that direction where he liked Serena leading him. He liked not having to make all the decisions. I think he always had some insecurity, and so having her to kind of guide him was a positive force in his life. I think he preferred playing support to somebody who would be the public figure, who would be very successful, and just enjoying everything that they accomplished. And there's nothing wrong with that dynamic. There's plenty of men who'd rather be in the background. There's plenty of men who would rather their wife have the thriving career and they be at home raising kids. Men who don't want the pressure of leading, men who are a little meeker in nature, that's all fine. But it wasn't fine for Fred because Gilead was saying that it wasn't okay. And there's one thing that a man should be. There's one stereotype of a man, and you better fit into it. And so when Fred was thrust into this role that he was really ill equipped for, those insecurities that were kind of always breeding in him became so much worse. It's why we see him go from being a supportive husband pre Gilead to a very vile person after Gilead, because now he's stuck. Now he's truly trapped. Now he doesn't at all have the life that he wants, but he doesn't feel good enough to be in this role. But if it's what God wants, if it's what Gilead wants, if men are really better than women, then he has to fit into this role. And so now, anytime he is challenged by Serena or June, he responds horrifically. Like when he was in the hospital and he finds out Serena was sending out memos on his behalf, he becomes violent with her to punish her and put her back in her place, even though we all know that was a place that he really enjoyed her being in. Because he flounders in this role of authority, he's very sensitive to anyone challenging that authority because he's not a strong enough person to yield it on his own. Which I think is another reason that his relationship with Serena really devolves, because ultimately he just doesn't want to be around her. He knows she's a force of nature, she's a strong woman, and that she can see weakness in him. And so if he just keeps as much distance from her as possible, then, he doesn't have to risk her noticing the weakness, noticing that he's not fitting this role. And obviously, one of the most vile things he does is take Serena's finger. And I think this surprised a lot of the audience because he had never been that violent or that horrible to Serena. If anything, behind closed doors, he actually let Serena get away with a lot. So why would he take her finger off just for reading a sentence in the Bible? Like, he knows she wants to read. But the answer is clear. He's willing to let things go behind closed doors because no one will see it and no one will question his authority. But she went to the commanders and she brought out the Bible and she read from it. And in doing so, she humiliated Fred. She made the other commanders look at Fred and be like, what's wrong with you? You can't get your wife under control? And that challenges his deepest insecurity that he cannot cope with. And so he decides, okay, I can either walk out of here with my tail tucked between my legs, or I can mutilate my wife. But if the decision is between me being publicly humiliated or Serena being mutilated for life, I pick Serena's mutilation. That man would do anything to not be perceived as weak, and the funny part is he wasn't even very confident in that decision. We see later that when June very much judges him for taking Serena's finger, that he kind of wilts in her presence for that. The man is never strong enough to stand by anything he decides to do. And again, I think for some people, it seemed like such an extreme action to take Serena's finger just because he's humiliated, but honestly, I think that was one of the most realistic parts of the show, because we see this in real life, that men's humiliation, men feeling disrespected, is very much connected with violent actions from men. As a woman, I truly believe one of the most dangerous situations you can put yourself in with a man is to question his manhood, because he will immediately want to prove it. And men have also been taught from a young age that violence is intrinsically linked to manhood. So if someone's questioning your manhood, what better way to respond than with violent action to prove that, hey, I'm a man, look what I can do to you. And Fred so often is violent in response to being humiliated. And I think of another commander who I think of as a lot more confident, which is Commander Lawrence. I did a video breaking down his character if you guys want that. Again, I've got a playlist with all these character breakdowns on my channel. But Commander Lawrence, for all his faults, is a very self-assured man. I think this comes from the fact that he really doesn't respect anyone in Gilead. He definitely doesn't respect religion, and so he's never vying for anybody's approval ever. And because he is such a confident man and doesn't feel the need to prove himself, he's a largely non-violent character in the show. When he is violent, it's extremely calculated, it serves a purpose, it's well thought out, and that is in very stark contrast with Fred, because his violence is always impulsive, doesn't serve a purpose. Like when June challenges him and he slaps her and she immediately slaps him back. And what does he do in response to this? Largely nothing. This is a man without a plan, without a goal, and who isn't strong enough to make people capitulate to them unless they just willingly give their power to him. Like, if Gilead is going to force women to hand their power over to Fred, then sure, he has power. But if those women take it back, then he's got nothing. He doesn't have the strength to have power without Gilead's umbrella. And the greatest irony is just that he doesn't realize how much this power is a prison for him. The patriarchy at large is a prison for him, because he was so much happier before he had to fit into the mold of what a man is in Gilead. He was so much happier when he was just Serena's husband and supporting her career. He never naturally fell into the role of being a commander, and he definitely wasn't happier for having been made one. And again, if you like these character breakdowns, please subscribe. I've got a whole playlist on my channel. And if you like reading The Handmaid's Tale, I'm just going to toss out there that I'm a longtime ghostwriter. I've been ghostwriting for 10 years. I've been featured in NPR for my work with celebrity clients, and I recently got my own book deal. It's for my debut female rage horror story about a fan who becomes nanny to a canceled influencer on a cozy Washington island, and you can read the prologue now. The info is in my channel. And if you grab the prologue, you might get a free early signed copy of the book. And you'll also get all my release day updates. You can also add it to any of the book trackers of your choice. I would so appreciate the support.